So in this module, we're now going to look at stage 5 of the clinical reasoning cycle, known as establishing goals. And to ensure that we can establish appropriate goals, it comes back to making sure that by this stage we've already identified the problems and issues and processed appropriate information. In healthcare, when we're creating goals for people, we need to make sure that we follow the SMART goals principles. And essentially, we need to be asking, well, are our goals specific? Are they measurable, meaning can they actually change something? And what is that change we want to see? Are they appropriate and are they relevant to the type of person? And do we have a time frame of when do we expect these changes actually to occur? So let's look at a bit of an example of an everyday change that we might want to make and see if it's a SMART goal. So for instance, let's say my goal is I will be healthier and start to eat better. Well, what does healthy mean? And what do I mean by eating better? It's not very specific. It's also not really measurable. For instance, do I want to lose a certain amount of weight, or is there only a particular amount of calories that I want to be able to consume each day? So it's not really measurable because I can't see exactly what I want to be changing. It doesn't also really stay here whether it's appropriate and relevant. And I guess in some ways, being healthier and starting to eat better, well, I guess that's appropriate for everyone, but we could probably be a little bit better with this. And of course, there is no time frame of when do I want to do this and how often. So let's see if I can improve this goal a little bit. So now I've changed my goal to I will eat at least 2 serves of fruit and drink 2 bottles of water. Now I've given a bit more detail here, which is really good, but I could probably be a bit more specific. So for instance, I've said drink 2 bottles of water. Well, how big is a bottle of water? It might be also a little bit appropriate or relevant, some of the things I've said, such as, well, I can eat 2 serves of fruit, and that's what a recommendation is, but I could probably be a bit more relevant because I haven't spoken anything in here about things such as vegetables in my diet. So I could probably be a bit more appropriate if I want to be healthier. I've also not specified in here what the time frame of this is. How often do I want to drink 2 bowls of water? This is going to occur for a week, for 2 weeks. Do I want this just to occur for 1 day? So I could probably work on this goal a little bit more. So now I've changed my goal again. And this time I've said, I will reduce my calorie intake to 1600 calories per day. I will eat at least 2 serves of fruit, 3 serves of vegetables, and drink at least 1500 mils of water every day for the next week. So here I've tried to be more specific by giving more details. I've also tried to put a few more measures in place. So this time I've actually specified exactly how much water I want to drink, but also how many calories I want to be able to take each day. And this first statement about my calorie intake can also link back to me about why this goal of being healthier or starting to eat better is probably more appropriate and relevant for my own context. What we also have in this goal as well is we also now have some time factors. We state here how often we want to do this and for how long. Now, of course, you could probably add some extra detail to this goal and make it even more SMART. But we can see a great difference here from goal 1 to goal 3. And that's more of what we have to consider when we are creating goals or establishing goals as a part of the clinical reasoning cycle. In this stage, we also need to consider long-term goals, or our overall outcomes, as well as short-term and medium-term goals, as these will assist us in our long-term goals actually occurring. So let's look at a scenario here. So say hello to Jeff. Jeff is an 18-year-old male and is currently completing his traineeship as a plumber. He's recently moved out of home, and 2 days ago, Jeff was unfortunately involved in a car accident that resulted in him having a fractured femur in his left leg and 2 broken ribs. He currently rates his pain as 6 out of 10 at rest and 8 out of 10 when he tries to talk. He is currently immobile and requires assistance with his daily needs, such as washing, dressing, feeding, and so forth. This morning you have a bit of a chat to him, and while you're giving his medication, and he mentions to you some of his upcoming goals that he wants to get done. He basically talks about how he's hoping to be discharged by tomorrow. He needs to go back to work as soon as possible so he can afford some of his bills that he thinks are overdue. And he wants to go back to tape by at least next week so he doesn't get too far behind in his study. Now, obviously, these three things that Jeff mentions to us are really important to him. But in the grand scheme of things, these are more medium to long-term goals. However, in the grand scheme of Jeff's presentation and where he's currently at, there's some really significant short-term goals that we need to establish for him. For instance, he has a fractured femur, and this isn't something that just repairs and heals overnight, and it's going to take some time. And this is particularly important because as a result, it means that he is immobile, he is in great pain, and does require a lot of assistance. So really getting control of this his pain and making sure that we have good appropriate care again to his broken bone, and as well as that his broken ribs as well, is a really good short-term goal for him, because if he can't manage that well, then he's not going to be able to be discharged. He's definitely not going to be able to go back to work. And even the things such as pain, or as we can see here, when he tries to talk and he's got pain of 8 out of 10, well, he's not going to be very good in his study with that. So therefore, managing his pain really is a good short-term goal for him right now. We also need to start looking at some medium-term goals for him as well. So once we can get the pain managed, then it's about looking at improving his mobility and perhaps looking at his level of assistance and his own independence with his daily needs. For instance, if he's got troubles with washing and dressing and doing very basic things like that, well, then that's definitely going to impact him being able to go to work or even be able to go back to TAFE and start to study. We also need to look at some of the larger impacts for Jeff as well. For instance, he's already moved out of home and lives by himself, but currently with his mobility and his assistance required, he's not going to necessarily be someone who's going to be able to just go straight back into home without assistance. So we might have to look at what his home currently looks like. Does he need any more assistance at home? And how is he going to work with this? And that's why looking at short-term and medium-term goals are really important, because if we can get these things undertaken and plan these things appropriately, then we can start looking at the larger long-term goals. However, we do need to make sure that we provide adequate empathy for Jeff in this situation and be not too critical on him. It's quite easy for us to sort of say, well, look, Jeff, you're not going to go home tomorrow. You're definitely not going to go back to work or TAFE for a while. But that might not necessarily be the best way of approaching the situation. And so we need to be quite person-centered in the way that we engage Jeff and be able to sort of talk to him in a way that, while it's really good that he has these goals, there's other things that we need to do first. And so once again, that is a good way of making sure that we're both being person-centered and empathetic towards Jeff, but trying to work with him and trying to establish goals with him that are more appropriate to him in this scenario.